Big news coming in just a short while, the electoral bonds verdict from the Supreme Court. The question is, can the anonymous electoral bond be allowed for the funding of political parties? The Supreme Court will be deciding on the validity of the electoral bonds for the funding of political parties. 6 years after the electoral bond scheme was introduced, Supreme Court will decide and rule on the validity of these bonds. Remember that the petitioners who have appealed to the apex court of the country have said that electoral bonds are against the idea of democracy, especially because of the anonymous nature of it. The Supreme Court 5-judge constitution bench led by Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud will pronounce the verdict at 10:30 a.m. So in just a short while, stay tuned as we continue to get you the latest on what is coming in on the electoral bond. Remember that ahead of the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, this could be the big verdict that we can expect, specifically because it concerns the funding of the political parties. And because these are usually anonymous electoral bond, can they be allowed for the funding as well? Since 2018, remember, this has been the big issue. There has been a debate on this, and the petitioners who have now challenged it in the court as well. Let's go across to our legal correspondent, Kanu Sarda, for the latest on that. Kanu, what precisely is the reason that the petitioners have approached the court against the electoral board? What is the reasoning behind their petitions?
Well, Pooja, basically the set of petitioners who have challenged the validity of the electoral bond scheme say that that the electoral bonds are against the idea of democracy. They are completely opaque in nature, and there is no capped political funding, and the voter who has to vote for the political party doesn't know from where the funding of that particular political party comes from. So all these contentions have been raised before the Supreme Court today. So basically, the Supreme Court will today decide whether the voter has a right to know or the donor have a right to privacy. Because remember, Senator had categorically argued before the Supreme Court that the scheme is completely transparent and it helps donors to maintain their secrecy, because that the person should not be linked to that political party if that political party doesn't come to power. So they have contended that the scheme was designed in such a way that nobody could be harassed in future if something of this sort happens as far as the funding of a political party is concerned. Whereas the Election Commission is also of the view that there is a need of tweaking into the...
Okay. Can you keep tracking the latest on that? Remember, the Election Commission also hasn't announced any ban on it, but had raised that it needs perhaps some level of tweaking. And because it's funding, there is a certain opaque nature to it. Can that raise questions? That's what the Supreme Court will give a verdict on. So stay tuned on this big verdict expected from the top court of this country on the electoral bonds, which involves funding to the political parties. It was launched in January 2018. Electoral bonds are basically financial instruments that individuals or corporate entities can purchase from a bank and then present it to a political party. It can also subsequently redeem them for funding. So that is how it helps a political party. This scheme was pitched as an alternative to cash donations that are made to the political parties across the country, and as an attempt possibly to bring more transparency in the political funding. But during the hearing, concerns have been raised about the same issue, about the transparency of these electoral bonds. Petitioners have argued that the bonds undermine the public's right to be informed, to know who is funding which political party. This can also serve as opaque, anonymous instruments that can foster corruption within the country. However, the government at the centre has asserted that the electoral bond schemes ensure a fair usage of funding for political purposes and through proper banking channels, emphasizing that the need to maintain the confidentiality of donor identities to protect them is from potential retribution by other political parties.